Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. So another one about Trump and his owning of Gaza and his temporary or permanent relocation of Palestinians. Obviously all the journalists around the world are jumping on this for right reasons, of the fact that it's against international law and the fact that it's this like Puppetmaster game that these world leaders think they can play with other sovereign countries and their individuals. Like talking about relocation and rebuilding as if like, look at me, how great I am, I want to rebuild. You know, but wait a minute, standing next to the Israeli Prime Minister who spent a year and a half destroying Gaza. Yeah, I mean, obviously he would say it was to get rid of terrorists. I don't know if the terrorists were living in every single part of Gaza, and hospitals and UN buildings, although there's some controversy about that, schools and etc. You know, buildings that are against, which, you know, there is still an edict over Netanyahu. Of course, America's not signed up to that regulation that he's wanted for the way that Gaza, you know, was the electricity, the gas, the water was all turned off, the bombs. Where the bombs come from, a lot of them are funded or manufactured by the United States. And there's these two that collectively have taken part in the destroying of this, and the lives, of course, because, you know, buildings can be rebuilt. But obviously international law forbids the killing of innocent people, of which there must be a very large amount. And of course the history of Israel and Gaza and relocation and land grabbing and the international law that I think is over 40 years that Israel hasn't followed, and the West and the Westerners haven't tried to push. You know, when the people they don't like China and Russia, do things, it's like, oh, this is, you know, unacceptable and you're not allowed to do this, and they put pressure on them and sanctions and all sorts of things. But when it's their friends, it's like, oh, it doesn't matter, you haven't followed that international law for 40 years of taking over bits of other people's land and you should be giving it back. No, you carry on building houses on it. I know that's oversimplifying the thing, but it's just the audacity of these two men who have blood on their hands because of, I mean, maybe not so much Trump because he wasn't in power, it was more Biden, but as an American who, you know, is fully supportive of Israel's path and the supplying of the weapons, because Biden stopped them, isn't it? And Trump has given that back. And yet they're talking about as if they care about the Palestinian people that have been suffering. And like there was an ex-US senator talking about, wow, all Palestinians voted for Hamas, and as if that's the case. As if, you know, how much choice did they have? How many of them actually voted? How many of them actually want peace rather than, you know? And of course there is situations why they feel maybe this is their only option because of the way the West is just turning a blind eye to international law. But the main thing is this Puppetmasters thing, this idea of that other countries have a say. You know, like who cares about what you think? It's not your country. It's not your people. You concentrate on your people. Of course, they would probably say, well, we're going to give aid and we're going to give money and we're going to fund it. Or it should be that the people who bombed it should be the people who pay for it. But obviously America and maybe some of the West are guilty because they supplied the bombs, and therefore maybe they do have a duty to rebuild it. But yeah, just this idea of that they can decide what happens to another set of people just because they haven't been given a state, because of the way the world works in deciding who gets to have a state and who doesn't. But just the disregard for actual human beings and the suffering they've gone through, and that the people that are talking about this plan are partly responsible, so how can they be trusted? And the double standards and hypocrisy of how if it was somewhere else, it would be treated completely different. And like to still be standing by the relocation of people, which is against international law. Yeah, I know he's going to say, well, how do we rebuild it with all those people there? Why did you bomb it in the first place? Why are you making weapons that can make this happen? Because at the end of the day, America's going to give out contracts and make lots of money out of these building contracts like they did in Iraq and Afghanistan. It shouldn't be a money-making exercise. And are you going to guarantee that all the people that leave that had homes will be relocated in those new homes? No, they're going to have to start again if they're even let back. They'll probably make some kind of process where it's really difficult to get back. And then they say, well, it's not our fault. You don't have paperwork, or you don't have enough money to afford these places. Take care, take it easy, God bless and peace.
Now, in other news this morning, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has praised Donald Trump's idea for rebuilding Gaza. The US president wants to permanently resettle Palestinians in other Arab countries, suggesting that he was willing to use force if necessary. Benjamin Netanyahu was speaking to Fox News presenter Sean Hannity overnight.
The actual idea of allowing first Gazans who want to leave. I mean, what's wrong with that? They can leave. They can then come back, they can relocate and come back, but you have to rebuild Gaza. If you want to rebuild Gaza, you can't have, this is the first good idea that I've heard. It's a remarkable idea. And I think it should be really pursued, examined, pursued, and done, because I think it will create a different future for everyone.
Our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle able to join me now live from Jerusalem. Ali, when this plan was sort of initially announced by the president, it seemed to take not just Netanyahu by surprise, but all of Israel and Jerusalem and the region. Is the suggestion now that Netanyahu's on board with it?
Oh, I think Netanyahu would have been on board with it from the moment that it was mooted by President Trump. I suspect Netanyahu understands and privately sees the difficulties in implementing what Donald Trump had to say a couple of nights ago, not least because any forced removal of Palestinians from Gaza would almost certainly breach international law and be an act of ethnic cleansing. And I'm sure Netanyahu, sees the problems with the deployment of US troops in large numbers to Gaza for a long period. And, no doubt Netanyahu is very aware of the way Donald Trump conducts his business, often making very outlandish statements and then rowing back on them. And on that, actually, there was a briefing by the White House press secretary last night where she seemed to slightly row back on one element of what Trump had to suggest by saying that this would only be a temporary relocation for Palestinians in Gaza. Trump had said it would be a permanent relocation. And just to what Benjamin Netanyahu was saying in that clip with Fox News about, the voluntary departure of Palestinians from Gaza, what is wrong with that? Well, two things to note. Firstly, the defense minister in Israel, Israel Katz, has apparently given instructions to the IDF to start looking at ways that Gazans could leave Gaza. Now, one of that is the land crossing into Egypt, the Rafah crossing. That was due to open anyway after all the female civilian hostages were released. That's due to open as part of the ceasefire agreement. But apparently, he's instructed the IDF to look at options for sea and air departures of Gazans to leave voluntarily. But I think, we need to be very careful about this word voluntary. You might hear politicians, diplomats over the world saying, well, look, if people want to leave voluntarily, then, what is wrong with that? Which is exactly what Netanyahu had to say. But human rights organizations and Palestinians will say, well, you've spent 15 and a half months bombing Gaza, making it pretty much unlivable, and now you're saying we can leave. What is voluntary about that?
Ali, as always, thanks so much. Alistair Bunkle there live in Jerusalem. Let's have a look at